Spread for defile. Spread for defile. Everybody. Dratnos. Dratnos, you're not spread. You're standing in the defile. Dratnos. Dratnos. Dratnos has wiped the raid. As he slumps into his chair. All right. So, if you've been hiding under a rock for the past 24 hours, there's been a lot of 9.2 news with some things that have been data mined on the 9.2 PTR. 9.2 PTR is not up for play testing yet, but there is some stuff that has been data mined out of it. A lot of interesting tier sets. There's been some legendary acquisition news. The Dungeon Journal has also been data mined out of it. There's going to be a lot more stuff coming out about 9.2. But first, we wanted to take a look at the Dungeon Journal, some of the notable mechanics, and talk about some of the boss fights, because also the full boss list got linked as well, right?
Yeah, so in this video, we're going to take a look at the boss Dungeon Journal, some of the cool mechanics that are there, and then we'll take a look at some tier sets. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit spoilery, so yeah. I mean, I guess you probably wouldn't be here if that is something you were bothered by, but figured it was fair warning.
All right, so I actually think that there are a lot of very interesting mechanics on some of these bosses. So first, I think that let's talk about Prototype Pantheon. Oh, actually, we'll talk about Artificer Zymox first. So they're bringing Artificer Zymox just completely back. But the fight is a little bit different. This is like a wall of text like you would see in the Dungeon Journal. The TLDR is that it has some of the similar mechanics just in callback form, but the fight is relatively different. There are some teleportation style stuff. There's also like a tank mechanic that teleports your whole entire raid to the tank is what it seems like. And then there's ads that spawn at like 80, 50, 20% HP marks. Yeah. And those ads do varying things, right?
Yeah. So he's still, doing the same thing he was in Castle Natra, where he's messing around with relics, but it's like a different relic, does some different stuff. And then there's still wormholes teleporting around. There's still stasis traps. There's still mechanics, presumably, that are going to require you to wormhole all over the place. But it's definitely, hopefully a good mix of familiar mechanics and new stuff on that fight. It is only the third boss in the raid, so it likely won't be too difficult. Zymox and Castle Natra, though, was one of the harder fights for where it was in the raid.
On farm, it would be you would incur a 1 hour penalty on your farm every single time.
Oh yes.
But I do think that this fight it's different enough, but it looks like it will at least be a pretty decent callback. Next up, Prototype Pantheon, which is actually it's got a lot of mechanics for a fourth boss of an instance. You want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, so there's 4 bosses here that you fight through different times. It looks like they sort of come out at different times. So you're not fighting all 4 at once necessarily, but there's one for each covenant. So there's a Prototype of War, which is a Necrolord themed one. Prototype of Duty, this Kyrian themed one. Prototype of Renewal, this Ardenweald themed one that makes these seeds that you have to heal. The healers have to heal. And then there's the Prototype of Absolution, which is the Venthyr themed one. And that one has some mechanics from the Sire Denathrius fight, such as Burden of Sin, where you gain stacks of Burden of Sin at the start of the fight, and then potentially you can clear them, although I actually don't see a way to clear them.
It's probably the Racking Pain, isn't it?
Maybe, yeah. Racking Pain doesn't mention that it would clear, but it did on the Sire fight, so I guess it probably does here as well.
Yeah, it's the only thing that would really make sense is that that's the way to clear it. But I think that they're just the design of this fight, how it seems like they're doing a 4-boss instance or a 4-boss like fight, and then doing this, just how they're navigating, making sure that they all kind of feel unique, because they are very. It seems like you're looking to do pretty different things with just each of these fights with how it is working, and it looks like it's also a 3-phase encounter with all 4 bosses active. I wonder, like, are they going to share HP? That's probably the most likely scenario.
It looks like they don't share HP. Phase 1 is 2 of them, and when either of them reach 50% health, it goes to phase 2. And then phase 2, when either of those other 2 reach 50% health, it goes to phase 3. And then in phase 3, it's all 4 of them, it looks like.
I see.
And so they don't share health. Presumably, you're going to have to kill them around the same time as well, although.
And you also get this Pantheon of Death that enters the fight for a final showdown as well.
Yeah, so Pantheon of Death and Prototype Pantheon are being used interchangeably here. Presumably, they have yet to pick which of those is going to be actually the name of the fight.
Okay, so it's not a 5th Pantheon then.
It's not a 5th Pantheon. No, Pantheon of Death is that's all 4 of them.
Yeah. Okay. I do think that we've had some fairly lackluster council fights. I guess Council of Blood is probably the best council fight. The 9 was, I would say, a pretty weak council boss for this expansion. I think that this is going to be a more prototypical council style fight, though, just with how it's working. I do like how I feel like Blizzard, just as a general rule, has put a lot more effort in their early and mid bosses with over the past like couple of expansions, to the point where they're trying new things, they're doing a little bit different stuff on these early to mid bosses, and they're making them feel more whole. And this is one that, and the dungeon journal is really long, but I suspect that this is going to be, I mean, it is the fourth boss. I suspect it's going to be pretty simple, but feel like a fairly unique fight whenever you're looking at it early on in the raid.
Yeah, I think that is the hope. Again, this is the fourth boss of the tier, so it's unlikely that it will be that dangerous, but you never know. Sometimes they put pretty tough ones pretty early on. Of course, what was it? Painsmith Raznal was the sixth boss
Yes.
in Sanctum, right?
Yeah, exactly. Painsmith pretty tough, though.
So then we've got a couple of bosses that we're not going to talk about up next, but we can talk about Anduin Rin a little bit, who is the 8th of 11 bosses.
Yes. So it's interesting because Anduin, I feel like they can go two ways with this fight. So this can either be the 8th out of 11 fights, out of the 11th boss, right? In which the 8th fight in an 11 boss raid instance is normally not that difficult. It's normally like, for a lot of guild, like a lot of higher end mythic guilds at least, this is like a 20 to 30 pull boss range kind of fight. It's not overly complicated. There are some like pretty challenging mechanics, like one or two very challenging mechanics, but ultimately it's normally pretty easy. At the same time, Anduin, with how they've set up like the boss progression in this raid instance, where Anduin, all the way to Anduin, is available on the first week, and then the final 3 for heroic are available the second week, plus mythic opens up. It makes you wonder, is Anduin going to be a very difficult fight? Is this going to be kind of like a where you have 2 end bosses in one raid instance? That could absolutely be a thing. I could definitely see that happening. At the same time, is this going to be like a Rosticon situation where people are speculating that there may be 2 end bosses and there ends up only being 1? For Anduin, one of the most crucial mechanics is this one that resembles the Grand Conjunction from Star Augur, how you have to so it's called Blasphemy, and Anduin intensifies the light and darkness within several players, marking them with overconfidence or hopelessness for 6 seconds. Coming into contact with the opposing mark neutralizes the effect on both players. After 6 seconds, the marked players explode. 6 seconds, by the way, that is very fast for you to have to reach your partner. And then it deals damage with it to all players within 8 yards. And so coming into contact with an unmarked player or a player with the same mark also causes this explosion.
Yeah,
I'm interested
so
to see how this works.
It is a twist, right, on the Star Augur and the Unot mechanics, right? Star Augur, you had to find somebody with the same mark as you, and there were like 3 or 4 different types of mark, right?
Yeah.
That you would so like all the triangles would run and try and find each other, right? And the circles and stuff. Unot, you had 3 different types, but you cleared by going to the weapon of its type, right? So if you got the blue mark, you had to go to the trident, right? The blue weapon.
Same
and
with
so
Maiden.
that created interesting rules for how it would work. This one is a little bit different though. There are 2 different debuffs, right? Everybody's getting marked with either A or B, and you clear by running into somebody with the opposite mark as you. So it means you can't create like a rule for all the A's go to this part of the room and all the B's go to this part of the room, right? You have to instead, it has to be reactive. The only thing you could maybe do with the raid is you could be like, all right, all of the A's, like the A debuff are the movers and the B debuff plants, right? But the way you're going to wipe with this is it's only a 6-second duration, which is very short compared to the 10 seconds of Star Augur. I think even longer for the Unot one.
15.
Yeah, but those ones, of course, had extra difficulty, right? This one you clear by just literally finding one person of the 10 other people in the raid that has the opposite debuff as you. The other way you wipe is 3 people with the B debuff converge on one person with the A debuff, and they all run on top, and then one of the pairs clears, and then 2 of the A's collide and explode.
I'm very interested because this is like, it kills all players within 8 yards kind of mechanic, where a lot of the times these fights are it doesn't just kill all the players within 8 yards, it wipes your whole entire raid kind of situation. So maybe this is going to be one of those things that it's going to feel a little bit better to progress because you won't like wipe your whole entire raid. You may just lose 2 people. At the same time, it may just be like a full raid wipe thing still.
Yeah. I suspect it'll be like you can practice still when it happens, but I don't think people are going to be killing this boss or having deep pulls where, people are colliding.
It's so weird because those style of mechanics, like this blasphemy mechanic, is so polarizing on a boss that typically it's going to be one of the only like parts of a fight. But with looking at how Anduin is set up, he does a lot more than just this one polarizing mechanic, which leads me to believe that this, if tuned like hard, it absolutely could resemble another end boss in the raid instance, which is. I would be very surprised if we have just 200 pull bosses inside of one raid. It's obviously this for mythics. Like for heroic, I suspect it's gonna be tuned down a little bit.
Yeah, notably, this will be the end boss for week 1 heroic.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could be pretty tough in that context. It could end up feeling harder than the jailer on heroic, even because you'll be pulling it with much less gear than by the time you're able to pull the jailer the second week.
Yeah. I mean, in the last phase too, there's also the Dire of Blasphemy, and it changes a little bit. Anduin intensifies the darkness with players afflicting with dire hopelessness. Afflicted players suffer 1,500 shadow damage every second, and after 1 minute, the afflicted players explode, dealing damage to all players within 8 yards. Coming in contact with another player with dire hopelessness also causes this explosion. That means that some players are going to have to get out of the raid, and they are taking insane dot damage. So there's going to be like an enrage more or less on the fight, at least a soft enrage where there's going to be an insane amount of healing that's going to go out. I wonder how many healers are going to run for this fight, because in particular, like this whole entire expansion, there have been a lot of 5-heal fights.
There has been quite a bit of extra healers this expansion, compared to the BFA trend of, it was like 4 healers in Uldir, 3 healers in Bod, 2 healers in Eternal Palace.
Yeah.
Right, it was just snaking downward.
All right. Anyways, Anduin Ren, I think that this boss is going to be up in the air for tuning purposes. I am very excited to see how this fight just plays out. I think that the callbacks and the Star Augur style mechanics, if they are done well, they always are. They're very frustrating, but they are fun.
Star Augur mechanics are probably my favorite mechanic that the game has is the Star Augur mechanic of having to like frantically find somebody the right person to run into, and if you do it wrong, you explode.
All right, so next up we got Rygalon, which
this boss is sort of cosmically themed, similar to Elegon. You can see a similarity in the name as well. Some of the items as well look pretty cosmic, and also there's that beautiful celestial armor kit that's in the store right now, maybe on theme with this as well. It's got those sorts of mechanics, right? Black holes, pulsars, all the words that you learn in astronomy class. So that's most what's going on with this one.
As a penultimate boss, this is going to be one of the fights that we need to see the most out of, because there have been a lot of issues with penultimate bosses this expansion, and
I got high hopes though. Elegon was one of the fights people liked.
Yeah, is it because it dropped a mount, or is it because it was very interesting?
Shh. Don't worry about it.
All right. Anyways, so there's going to be like these collapsing fields that you have to come into contact with, and you have to drop a debuff. That's going to be interesting to see like how you set these up. Are you going to be able to place the fields? Or are you just going to have to look around the room and be like, okay, so I'm getting this debuff here, I have to run and go drop my debuff off in the field? Also, it seems like if somebody else comes in contact with the fields, then they go away. They get consumed, which can be problematic as well.
You get like a debuff that you need to clear by running into one of these collapsing quasar fields, but each one of those can only be run into once, and then it disappears. So you need to make sure that probably only the people that have that debuff are the people that run into them.
Yeah, there's also mentions from this Unstable Matter where it's talking about mechanics that form within pylons along the edge of the arena. And so pylons are mentioned a couple of times here, but it's not super clear what they are. They're obviously going to be like parts of the room, but it's not super clear what they mean. So let's get
here's my theory. The pylons, this is going to be the tie-in for what 10.0 which is going to be, which is the big reveal that Warcraft and Starcraft are actually the same universe, and the pylons are Protoss pylons, and that's going to be that 10.0 is World of Starcraft. Heard it here first.
Anyways, all right. So moving away from Ragalon, yeah, it's gonna be Celestial themed. I think that this is the one that's going to be like probably the one that's people are going to be. This one and Anduin, I think, are the ones that people are most looking at for.
Well,
with,
Lords
like,
of Dread is
skepticism.
also that's got Mal'Ganis in it. It's Dreadlords.
Oh yes, this is true. Do you want to talk about this one?
No, we could just go on to the Jailer, because the Jailer, of course, is one that is extremely hyped. Of course, mythic end bosses tend to not be fully talked about in the Dungeon Journal. I haven't really seen any mythic mechanics in these Dungeon Journals so far yet, though, either.
Yeah.
But we probably will not learn about what the Jailer on Mythic looks like until until somebody pulls it. But the mechanics we see so far are pretty interesting. There's this reference to line of sight, and line of sight, the Jailer dominating all players and pylons within line of sight. So whether that's going to mean you have to carefully maneuver him so that he doesn't see all the pylons, and whether that means you have to hide behind pylons or other terrain features to avoid having the Jailer see you, that's an open question, and something I'm worried about initially about this fight. Is the last end boss fight that heavily used line of sight mechanics was Queen Ajara, and it was my least favorite part of that fight, was having to duck behind you had this weak aura that told you when you had to duck behind, and it is very fiddly and didn't feel all that satisfying to just clear your debuffs by dropping out of line of sight. So I hope that, however, the line of sight can function well. I think it can function well when it's like an explosion that you have to hide from, not just like a ticking debuff that you have to clear by dropping out of line of sight for 4 seconds.
Yeah, it also looks like after phase 1, it's kind of unclear as to whether or not you're fighting the Jailer in phase 1 or not. Like it seems like you're going to be, but then you enter this intermission, and the Jailer is summoning these ads that you're going to have to fight in the first intermission. Phase 1 and phase 1 intermissions have been something that Blizzard has been getting better at, but their phase 1s have been historically not great on some fights, just with how the fight feels pacing wise. And so that's going to be something that we're going to be looking towards, is like, how does phase 1 feel? How does this first intermission feel? Because typically end bosses have like 2 or 3 phases, maybe even 3 to 4 phases, with like a fairly standard not a standard intermission, but like an intermission that you have to go and do something. That's the general blueprint for end bosses. Making sure that these feel like they're all interconnected and like you're actively working to achieve a goal is something that has been not the greatest from time to time, but it's going to ultimately come down to like how it feels. It's not even just a sense of like, we can't even take this away from the Dungeon Journal. It's just going to be more of like a mental game of how it feels as a player. One
cool mechanic that will be here in phase 3 is Defile. Defile, an ability last seen in the Lich King encounter, and obviously we now know that the Lich King and the Jailer domination magic, right? Helm of Domination. There's a link there, so there's a lore reason why the same mechanic could be used by the Jailer. But it is basically the exact same mechanic as 10 years ago in Wrath, 13 years ago. Oh my goodness. Where you would take the it would be it's like a void zone that when you stand in it gets bigger, and that's a very iconic ability from the Lich King fight.
Yeah, that's going to be the last phase of the Jailer. In addition to that, another thing that's kind of cool, and it's a weird reference. It says Zoval launches a volley of missiles at Azeroth, decreasing Azeroth's health by up to 20%. One of these missiles can be intercepted by each player, inflicting 60 shadow damage. Are we gonna have to stand in between Azeroth and the Jailer? It makes me wonder, like, where are we actually fighting this boss, kind of thing?
I think it's not going to be the planet Azeroth so much as like the world soul or whatever, in the same way that like Argus, when we fought Argus, we weren't fighting an actual planet, we were fighting like a personification of the planet. But yeah, I feel like that's what's going to be happening here. And then this mechanic is going to involve us needing to soak these so that Azeroth doesn't die, because presumably that would be bad for us.
Yep, and then he also has the domination where he attempts to MC you,
we don't
dominating
know
all
for sure that
players.
that's what that does, but yeah, we don't know exactly what domination does, right? But we do know it has something you're gonna have to hide in some way if you don't want it to happen to you.
All right, so I'm very interested to see how the raid ends up playing out. We're about 20 minutes in. I think we should probably cut to the tier sets at this point.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming tier set bonuses. All of them are now data mined, although it's worth caveating here that they're heavily subject to change. There's a good chance that several of them are not going to make it to live, that both the weakest and the strongest are in grave danger of not making it as they currently are. Although, sometimes they will. Some of them certainly will make it to live looking exactly as they do right now.
I think that a lot of the tier sets, they've taken a lot of creative liberties, just slamming random talents into your tier sets as well, which is something that the Blizzard has historically not done. But I think that it's a really cool design decision with some of these tier sets. Also, the class guide writers for Wowhead are going to be making a more in-depth, reaction feedback kind of post in a couple of days. I think it's going to be a little bit later next week to try to get all of their thoughts, but this is going to be just the general winners, losers, kind of where the tier sets are looking to stand here. So first off, let's talk about healers. So
Yeah,
neither you or I play healer, but I think we have a good idea of what this is.
There's a lot of these healing tier sets are quite situational, or they are based on abilities that aren't currently parts of the core ways that the healers do good healing. Like the Resto Druid one, for instance, empowering Swiftmen so that it is a more powerful heal on the target, and then the 4-set making it so it also does some AoE healing. It's not particularly synergistic with the current Resto Druid build. You can obviously build for more Swiftmens, and probably you will do that depending on what the numbers are on the tier set here.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think it's one that's not particularly exciting for Resto Druids.
And I think that that's like kind of a general theme with a lot of the healer ones, because then like Discipline Priest getting effectiveness of penance, I mean, it's not bad. It's just penance damage. And then Shaman, I feel like Resto Shaman kind of got the shaft here with like Chain Heal critical strikes reduce the remaining cooldown of Spirit Link Totem by 2 seconds. How healing works in a raid is, especially with Spirit Link Totem, is your Spirit Link Totem is going to be set at a very specific time. And so there's not going to be very much variance in it to the point where you're really okay with having critical heal from Chain Heal reducing the cooldown of Spirit Link, unless you can assure it to get to a 2-minute CD. Even 230, while it could be useful, it's not going to be that great, because mechanics in raid in particular come out on these like very set intervals, whether it be 30 seconds, whether it be a minute, whether it be 2 or 3 minutes. They come out on very set intervals, and having things like Chain Heal critical strikes reduce the remaining cooldown Spirit Link Totem by 2 seconds, it's just not overly practical. It's probably going to be pretty decent. Okay, actually, I was about to say it's probably going to be pretty decent in Mythic Plus, but you don't even really Chain Heal in Mythic Plus, so it's not even going to be maybe that insane.
Yeah, this effect can be potentially very good, but it would require a pretty specific fight to do that. It would require a fight where that extra Spirit Link that you get, the cooldown reduction on the Spirit Link, lets you do a Spirit Link that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do, right? That is a good Spirit Link. And like you said, the fact that it's keyed off this crit healing, you need to have it reliable, right? We're looking at like 98% plus, 95% plus confidence that you will reduce it to where it's assigned. Because anything less than that, and you're going to just be wiping the raid way more often than the value that it's worth, right? And it'll be better to just come up with another way to heal through something. But there are sometimes fights where, like, hey, the cooldown, the timer between these abilities is 2 minutes 10 seconds, right? It's 2 minutes 35 seconds. Like, there are fights like that where those critical moments are weird times apart. And if there is one of those, and this tier set reliably reduces Spirit Link so that you can land it in both of those spots, then it'll be phenomenal. It'll be phenomenally valuable. My guess, though, is that there's 0 to 1 such fights per tier, probably closer to 0.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I think that that's like just like the general gist of how the healers tier sets have looked, except for Holy Paladins, which, I mean,
yeah, the Holy Paladin one is just completely like unconditional, fantastic. It gives you a charge of like a giga heal on your, when it reliably every 30 seconds, you'll know that it's coming and that you get to then hit your wog and hit your lighted on for triple effectiveness. And you're also reliably reducing your wings cooldown in a, with complete predictability on how that will work as well. Damage increase, right? Wings, huge damage, and also a huge healing increase on basically any number of targets. I mean, it is a beautiful tier set for. I mean, thank goodness. I was worried about Holy Paladins for a bit there. I thought they maybe weren't going to be good for a tier, but they're getting a great tier set.
I think it just like shows, like, man, it's never like, honestly, there are some things that you can reduce the cooldown of for healers, but it's never going to be like, it's similar to if this was reducing Aura Mastery instead of Avenging Wrath, we'd have the exact same conversation as like the rest of Shaman. It's like, okay, this is like not even as useful. But since it's Avenging Wrath, it's a little bit different because wings can be used offensively. Typically is used very offensively. Plus, it seems like they're going to be able to get 2 per like they're just gonna get 1 per minute, so it's just gonna be like really good. Overall, though, it feels like kind of the general consensus for the healers that are not Holy Paladin is like, this doesn't really alleviate the weaknesses of the specs or the reasons that these specs are particularly weak. At the same time, I suspect that this is going to probably continue to push us towards the same healer meta. Maybe we're going to see something like Mistweaver Rise, Mistweaver getting a little bit more HPS, which they didn't really need, but I mean, you're never really upset as a Mistweaver, so maybe we're going to get a shakeup in the healing meta just due to the fact that Mistweaver's HPS is nuts, but wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah, I think so. They're like the throughput of the Mistweaver. The thing is, like, if great throughput allows you to drop a healer, the problem is then, like, if you've got a Mistweaver, say you drop to 3 healers because of great throughput that your Mistweaver is bringing, you're dropping down to then just 2 Holy Paladins or Disc Priests. Is that going to be enough damage reductions to cover the spots in Mythic Rating where you need damage reductions? It'll be hard. It's not impossible, but it would be hard for me to expect that to be true.
Yeah. All right. So that's basically our general thoughts on healers. For tanks, most of the tanks are just pretty good tier set wise, right?
Yeah, we got a little bit of a stinker with the Brewmaster one. The Brewmaster is a pretty unfortunate one. The 2-piece is unexciting, small amount of damage reduction that's not full uptime. And then the 4-piece is just, it has this line of text that's pretty much non-functional about shuffle duration increase, and then it gives you like 2 extra Celestial Brews over the course of a 10-minute boss fight, something like that, which is a pretty low impact thing, and that's assuming you're firing those off on cooldown as well. It gets worse if you're not, obviously.
But a lot of the other tank ones are pretty good, right? Like, even notably the Blood Decay one. I was actually reading online.
Blood Decay one is a banger for M+. Yeah, that one, it synergizes well with the Dancing Rune Weapon Legendary. It's that one is actually going to be pretty fun and M+. And so is the Prop Paladin one, firing off free judgments at stuff when you block. Huge. Both of those are going to really change the feel of the specs, especially in multi-target situations.
Yeah, Guardian Druid. Guardian Druid one looks good.
That's good too, yeah.
Berserked is the same as Incarnation. Guardian Druid was already unkillable. Guardian Druid is going to continue to be unkillable. Maybe this is going to give them a little bit more damage. Their threat on pull probably still not going to be great, but at the same time, they're never going to die. I think that a lot of the tanks, though, generally are looking fairly solid, just tier set wise, outside of maybe Monk. Yeah, Monk with the big stinky thinker.
Yeah.
So
true.
For DPS, I would say that just generally for most of the DPS, they are by and large not that bad. They're all pretty good, and they all are very, I don't want to say all, but a lot of them are very interesting with how they're interacting with kits. I think it's for DPS, it's just going to kind of fundamentally come down to numbers and how it's going to make the specs feel like they're playing. I think 2 of the big winners though are the Assassination Rogue and just Warlocks in general. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that these specs, some look really cool. The Sin Rogue one here, Vendetta causing your poisons and bleeds on your target to expire 100% faster. That is a huge damage increase for your Vendetta on single target. It's not 100% more damage on your Vendetta, but it is close to it. It is worryingly close to it. So that is going to be phenomenal amount of single target there. The Warlock ones, though, I mean, all three of these are bangers, and they all fit really well into each spec's niche as well.
I think the Destra ones are the ones that people are looking at the most,
The
because
Destra one is the one I'm least confident will make it to live of all of the tier sets we've seen so far. Yeah.
So for the 2 set, Herald of Chaos, casting a Rain of Fire Chaos Bolt has a 20% chance to make the next cast of the other free. This is a fairly common, fairly standard 2 set. This is not anything new. The 4 set, Avatar of Destruction. When Rain of Fire or Chaos Bolt is freely cast, you summon an Infernal for 8 seconds. Okay. Very good. That is this. Okay, so Destro, you haven't seen a lot of Destro this expansion, but Destro's niche right now is like they're very good at AoE, especially burst AoE. And you haven't seen a lot just this expansion, but at the same time, their burst AoE, if you watched any of the MDI, there were some pulls that were just insane by Destro locks. And this is not just going to be an MDI thing, but there are going to be some 800, 900 million DPS pulls by Destro locks next patch, because all these Infernals going to be flying out, and it's going to be a little bit RNG, but at the same time, this is a level that it's going to make it feel pretty fun. And I think that this is actually a very good set bonus for Destro. All the Warlock ones look pretty good, just as a general rule. There's a lot of other DPS ones. I know Fire Mage is pretty happy with theirs. They got Memory of Lucid Dreams back a little bit.
Yeah, they also are going to burn themselves for a cool, third of their health on their combustion. Love that.
Well, they deserved it. Anyways.
I mean, they are not going to be the ones complaining about it. It's going to be the healers and the rest of the group. It's like, dude, what's happening? I'm combusting. You don't understand.
I think the only other DPS that I really saw complaining was like the Unholy DK talking about Soul Reaper exit. But I think that this could potentially be very useful for some fights, depending on how valuable Execute is next patch. So this is going to be one of those things that we have to kind of wait and see. It's also going to be due to tuning. Like I said, there's going to be a post coming from the class guide writers talking about like numbers on the stuff, how it's going to feel to play. There's going to be a lot more in-depth results on the set bonuses. Of course, you can also go to Wowhead and look at the set bonuses for your specific spec or class. We did not cover them. There's a lot of really cool ones, and I'm super excited for tier sets to return now that I've seen them.
Yeah, I'm pretty hyped for these as well. The majority of them are ones that I'm pretty excited by. A lot of them just are like they cast free spells for you, cool spells from your kit. So I'm about that. I think that the most of these are hits already for me, and a couple of them are a little bit weak looking, but there's time. And they don't all have to be hits, right? That's not all. There's usually some bad ones.
True. There's always going to be some bad ones. In the meantime, what are your favorite tier sets that you're looking forward to in 9.2? Are there any that you think are just completely abominable and that you're going to reroll because they are that bad? They're probably not going to be that bad, but are there any that you believe are going to be that bad that are forcing you to reroll? Why is Windwalker Monk going to be still broken in 9.2? The world may never know.
We didn't talk about that one.
That one, they're broken. The water is wet. In the meantime, we will see you guys in the next video. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.